and I direct several guaranteed income and cash transfer programs, which give money to families of color. And when I talk about that work, it is so important for me to emphasize the why of people of color, and why start with Black women, why start with Indigenous communities. And it is because of the history of this country and the foundation of this country, the laws, the practices, policies that disenfranchise these communities, from its founding. And so when I think about the programs that I do, that lens is front and center. And when I talk about cash and I talk about social welfare policy and the ways in which it's crafted and excluded communities from getting the benefits entitled to them, that is very much a conversation starter for one, but also, the way that I look to in practice through these programs and the ways that we work with government to institute these programs and the research that we do that underlies these programs is to change practice, is to change ideas, is to change public opinion. So that's one part of what I do, but I also am a co-owner and founder of a coffee shop cooperative called Cafe X by Any Means Necessary. And that in and of itself is Black-centered. And my goal in creating a community cooperative was to build generational wealth for the Black community and other communities of color. And so, as you can imagine, my lens is very much informed by the intersections of race, class, sex, all of those things. And so I'll dig into it some more later, but everything that I do is really shaped by that very specific lens.
All right. For the song. Good. Greetings, everyone. Hello. Very glad to be here. I'm Joseph Lathan. And the question, how does critical race theory show up in every day? First, I want to just give thanks to my colleague, Dr. Rebekka Jez and the BLM committee for continuing this great work in this school. And I think for me, that has been probably one of the strongest implications of proof for me as the work that's being done at Souls and to be a part of that. I oversee the Master's of Education online program and our Education for Social Justice PhD program. And to see people in the master's level to the first time to hear about critical race theory or first time hearing about all of these concepts that we do that are normal in this community. So I really appreciate what USD stands for based on the work they're doing that's being transformation for our students, because I'm watching students being changed every day. And I play a huge role. I advise over 200 students. So having that much student contact and to be able to walk them through some of the pain and to walk them through some of the challenges and a lot of first gen. So those are so important because I think that it's so important that we have people of color in leadership positions, because now we finally have an opportunity to change the landscape, to allow others that are qualified have an opportunity to be in positions of authority. So if we're not in authority, how can others get ahead when the other person won't even allow them to take a look at your resume? So it's so imperative that we position ourselves as critical race theorists, knowing that what it stands for, but to always be introspective in everything we do. Are you checking yourself when you say something racist? When that thought comes, are you able to notice that it comes and kick it out? Because you can't stop all of it from coming, but it's what you do after when it comes. And that's the work of critical race theory, being able to explain what it is, because most don't even know what it is. So, and we probably should have started there, because there's still a lot of different views about critical race theory. And it's simply saying that it's embedded in whiteness. the system, the policy, and we must acknowledge that. And so all this theory is trying to do is to get the perspectives of Black and people of color finally recognized and given a voice. So that way, when you judge them for not being where they should be, you'll know why they didn't get there. I'll stop right there.
Very powerful. All three very powerful. I will say, and this leads into my next question, talking about authority. My day-to-day, I actually get to manage the city in some ways. I'm the mayor of the city that I live in. But I do have a friend because, I was talking before this, and we talked about the I'll say the minority in general as far as who's speaking out now. I actually had a friend who was on school board and ended up quitting because of this issue of CRT and what it means, people, threatening, I'll come to your classroom, I come see your kids and showing up at your house, that type of thing. How do we change that perception of CRT, the misrepresentation that we see? How do we support the community dealing with CRT when we look at CRT?
We have to give a lot of credit to the conservative right, because they've done a great job of kind of hijacking the CRT narrative. And and Dr. Lathan, I think you made this point. I don't know that folks really understand what critical race theory is. I don't think that folks understand its origins. I don't think folks really understand, its core principles and tenets and what it's about. And so in many ways, CRT has been sort of used to sort of signify this backlash towards racial progress. I mean, that's really, so, we hear in more mainstream conversations, folks are saying it's CRT, but not really CRT, right? It's about, it's anti-DEI, it's folks who really are not happy with racial progress. And we can almost, there's always been pushback and backlash and challenges to any type of racial progress in the country. But where, at least in my life, when I kind of felt the most intensity is after the election of President Obama, right? That's when the Tea Party movement, that's when you really, folks, you really start to see some semblance of it. And then, when Trump was elected, it's like everyone took their hood off. It's a little bit more comfortable, right? So CRT, they kind of, the right to use, good rhetorical tools, label everything that's about progress, making progress as CRT. Right? And ethics studies, you mentioned, being a student of ethics studies is kind of lumped into the same category, right? And so I think your question about why is there so much backlash and pushback, that was actually question. It's really a misunderstanding. Critical race theory is exactly, it's a theory, it's a perspective, right? It's we're all scholars, we're all academics, we study theories, we study, perspectives, we develop concepts all the time. But rarely do you see those theories and perspectives and concepts attached to sort of a mainstream social movement to get rid of, to address racial progress, right? Which is interesting because CRT, if you really study and understand and read about CRT, it actually predicts what is happening, right? Because it talked about, race really, race kind of being at the center of everyone's lived experiences in the United States, whether you're a person of color or if you're identified as white, right? What's happening, what we're seeing, it's almost predicted in the theory, right? And so I think, what do we do about that? What is our role? We're all educators here in this space too. I think we have to be better at, responding to situations like the one you described with your colleague, providing folks with good information. Most of the backlash, not most, but a lot of what we've seen with regard to backlash and CRT, where did it happen? In K-12 districts. I don't know too many K-12 schools that are even teaching critical race theory. Like most conversations about most academic and intellectual conversations about critical race theory happening in higher education, and more specifically in law school, right? Which is, critical race actually, it was a group of legal scholars who actually created it, right? Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, Derek Bell, thank you. Yeah, they were all they were law professors, and so there's a misunderstanding, there's a misperception. But part of the reason why it is because those of us really understand it, we haven't been as forthcoming about educating the mainstream about what it is, and why folks, CRT not the boogeyman in the closet that's coming to indoctrinate your kids and your family. I mean, that's the way it's kind of been framed.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
That was us. Okay, I got two things to say.
That was so well said. I like to think about some of these terms that are academic and, rooted in academia, as well a blessing and a curse for those reasons, because you have people who, it's a fragment, you have people on the ground, people who are living that every single day, and people in academia have some of the same experiences. But there's a disconnect between the two that I think it dilutes our power collectively. And so I even see that in my practice when I talk about, just giving cash to families who are poor, who don't have money, and building a movement around that, and thinking about some practitioners who are very ignorant, who get into, the history of the welfare state, and all of that is important to know, and it's critical race theory when we're talking about those conversations, but we leave some of the people in the communities behind when we don't build a movement that involves people. So when we have all these misconceptions, a lot of people talking, they're having a very intellectual conversation that is shaping, the narrative about what we're doing and experiencing in our communities. So I'm a big advocate of doing the thing, on the ground with the people and making that as much as part of the conversation as we do in our classrooms and, as we fight, in the government, in the halls of government, and as we testify to Congress, we have to bring people along, and even more than bring them along, we have to make it make sense to their experience, because this is happening to real people.
Right.
They're the ones having the experience. And I think when we have these conversations sometimes, there's not a thought about how to successfully organize around it. So I think that's a major key, to battling misconceptions and also normalizing critical race theory and conversation, because the closer you get to the ground, the more people are going to understand it, and the more we can chip away at false narratives and counter narratives.
So the fact, like I said, real quick, was that the irony. So love how you frame that. But I'm compelled to say the irony of this is that the colleagues who actually created critical race theory, they created it out of that same spirit, right? They were tired of folks, legal scholars just sitting around debating and theorizing about legal concepts and, legal doctrine, and said, what we're doing has no impact to communities. It has no impact to society. It's not doing anything to help us make any real social progress that's meaningful, that's tangible, that's having a positive impact on folks' lived lives and experiences, right? And so it's interesting that we find ourselves in this situation that we're in, right? Having to defend critical race theory because we haven't done the translation work that you just articulated that actually spawned the whole critical race theory movement in the 70s to begin with, right? And so it was just one of those moments, like, paying attention to what we're reading with, the very theory that we're sort of debating and defending tells us that everything that we do, right, as scholars and academics, whatever, that it has to be rooted into improving lives and improving communities. Otherwise, it's just Whatever.
Right. Yeah, I really echo, what both of my colleagues said, about the public spaces. Taking it outside the classroom is, like I said, the first time that a master's student will hear, any anti-racism, critical theory, or any work of that such, which is amazing. And so being able to really hit those public spaces, I think are very important. Also, I like to look at trying to find ways to engage more with parents. And I know that's not always easy, but if there's ways and means to engage with the parents to help them really understand what it means as opposed to the narrative that's being passed by school leadership, then it may be impossible to win some over. Now, the fact is you're not going to win everybody over. So that's just point blank. Somebody's never going to go ahead and agree with the tenets and the fact that, that what CRT is all about. But one thing about it, I think that what's important for us is to create white allyship. For me, that's been one of the most powerful tools that we as people of color have used. You think Martin Luther King was able to get all his agenda across without having some white colleagues in that march or in that? And I think it's important because perhaps they would be the ones that can reach the ones that can't be reached. Having the same, being the same, and having that place of privilege, and in order to be so, transparent that they can tell the truth on themselves to compel others to follow that same behavior. So I think that is probably one of the strongest things that we could do is to continue with building those partnerships and getting into doors that we, people of color, maybe cannot.
It's interesting, you mentioned okay, right? But I think sometimes we forget to remember about okay, is that he wasn't, where he really became under attack. So, he was always, under attack, obviously. If he started to talk about economic equity, right? And when he went, he was actually assassinated in Memphis. Does anyone know why he was in Memphis? What he was there to do? Said right, he was the one that supports the sanitation workers, right? So it was a union organizing guy. And that's when folks said, okay, enough was enough, and so it was not fine, right? But I think there was a little less discomfort when he was talking about, human rights, right, and racial rights. And when that became talking about economic empowerment, right, that's when folks really got, angst about it. Right. Mm-hmm. But I say that to say, you talk about allyship, all the sanitation workers, they weren't blacks, just black sanitation workers, right? There were a lot of, low income white folk who's part of that too. Yes. Right. And so I think sometimes, right, when we talk about what, one of the main tenets of CRT is, the challenge to dominant ideology and commitment to social justice and other forms of, oppression, right? And so it had a very intersectional approach to it, right? Kimberly Crenshaw was big in intersectionality, right? And so he talked about race, the intersection of race, poverty, and gender, and all these other things, right? That these identities, these targeted identities that we have to remember, right? We even as we seek to center race in the work that we do, we have to think about race through the lens of intersectionality also, right? Because, right, the intersection is really where marginality is marginality. Yeah, it's at the intersection, right? Okay. Right. And so I good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay.
All right, so we're going to move into healing. And by the way, we talk about lived experience. So I'll give a scenario. It's actually happening. But when people do things like, I'll support Black History Month when there's a White History Month. If we never take time to walk in someone else's shoes and have some empathy, how do we heal? Specifically, how do we get away from what culture tells us that we need to be separated or pointing fingers, calling names, picking sides? How do we actually get some healing in?
Moving into healing already.
Yeah.
Fired up. Well, I think healing, I see healing every day. It's one of the reasons why I thought about creating a coffee shop is because of the healing that occurs when you're in community and you're welcoming all the people that exist within those intersections. And there's something really powerful about being able to center the Black experience as you do that. And that's why Cafe X is special. That name, by any means necessary, is an allusion to Marques, one of my personal heroes. And the work that we do is very much about Black people. It's about Black empowerment. And we have so many other allies that, are people of color or not people of color or of different class statuses. And that's really, really critical. Because not only are we able to educate and do so in a very informal and sometimes unassuming way, when you're just over coffee or you're attending a workshop or you're out in the backyard and you're just talking. It's a process of exposure and also honest conversation with them, on a human to human level. And in a lot of my work, it's emphasizing and putting front and center the dignity of these conversations. A lot of the times when we try and educate, we tend to talk down to things like this. There's a passion that is justified. It's justified rage that we tap into, and it's important. And there's a place to meet somewhere where we can just talk. We can just talk and we can exchange dialogue, and there's spaces where that happens. So I think some of it is very complicated because we have to challenge laws and we have to protest, we have to fight. But a lot of it is sitting back sometimes. And that involves a patience, it involves just relationship building. So when I ask about healing, I'm thinking, it's through connection. And that's what I emphasize in my work, even when, I'm giving cash to families, guaranteed income, we meet on a human level. It's less patriarchal, more connected. So I think that's where it starts.
That's good. I think I'll go before Frank goes. You might go show there. But anyway, I'm glad. What a very great response. I really appreciate what you shared. And I guess the question is based on what the healing is. The healing is. I would like to share that a lot of my work. I'm a former pastor out of New York, and a lot of my work was built in churches, and the church has always been that community that Black people had to be able to find that empowerment, to get that support. But I like to center my work centered around my thesis on workplace spirituality. So I wanted to center on this spirit part of that is definitely something that everyone has, and it has no race, it has no color. These things that we have in common. So centering on spirituality to me is healing. And we need to make spirituality more inclusive. A lot of my work is spirit inclusive classrooms and workplaces. I should be able to bring my whole self. We say that it's you're okay to bring whatever color you are, whatever tradition you have. What about, can I bring my religion or my spirit too? So a lot of times when we talk about inclusiveness, spirituality is left out. And that's something that really has been the religion has been colonized to get the truth. So really all we have truly that's real, it's spirit when it comes down to it. But the thing that I'm really interrogating now, which is going to be my work that is, I'm really just starting to get to the iceberg of it, is love and education. And I want to interrogate why it's okay to have love and to use those words in education. And I think it's Diana Ross said it best, what the world needs now is love, you know, and that's really what we're really missing. Because if love humanizes people, it doesn't really base it on color. And then it's also reciprocal. So when I'm able to give you an output in love, it's returned. So we are now dishing out things to people that we don't want to receive. So it's important that we can really ground ourselves in the framework of love. So look for that word coming out from me, because to me, this is where now with all the hate, you can tell how do you know how divided the country is? Because the polls were 50-50. That's how you know how divided that we are. Frank.
I'll try to answer this. Two things I think really promote healing. I think conversations like this help promote healing. If they inspire us to go out and act and do something. Right. So if we leave this space having just had a nice conversation, I don't know that really gets us close to healing, right? We have to think, you know, how can I change policies? How can I serve communities? What's something very tangible and action-oriented that I can do in light of what I've learned today in the conversation that I've had, right? That's going to be something different. Healing is also very personal, right? I think, and we have to figure out what that is, right? And I'll even go into self-care. And so does that mean, you wake up and you pray or you meditate or you read? One thing I like to do, I like to box. So I box a few days a week every morning. And the reason why that's very important is because, right, we have to be able to sustain our energy and sustain our focus and sustain our effort, right? Because what we're doing and the work that we're doing can be very taxing and very exhausting, right? Particularly for people of color, right? And so I think it's important that we also, as we pour in to others and pour into our institutions, we also have to make sure we continue to rejuvenate and pour into ourselves as part of that.
Frank, can I add one more thing? I just wanted to mention, I forgot to mention, what does a framework of love look like? And being from a religious background, I wanted to share a quick text, 1 Corinthians 13:4-6. And it says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. That's the framework that will bring healing. If we can all operate in that spirit and really, really be our brother's keeper, then we won't have to worry about having these conversations.
Right, I think I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Jez, but I will just say, I thank the panel. I learned a lot, but I will also say every time we were talking about lived experience and I heard it, for some reason I'm thinking about phenomenology. But yes, I'll give it back to Dr. Jez, but thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. So, and I think we're going to go into Q&A as well, but
do we have time? Yeah, we could do a Q&A, and I can. Do we have any questions that somebody would like to ask? Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for the talk. My name is Rich, also representing the Love Crowd. This is great, this kind of program here. Like what Khea said, so it's come a long way. It's a time history. But my question has to do with K-12. Dr. Harris had mentioned K-12, CRT really not being there, the K-12 system right now. Another thing that was mentioned was how language has been hijacked, right? How CRT language has been hijacked and how to flip the narrative. So My question is as we look at the K-12 system, as we try to, work collectively to integrate these ideas, this kind of learning into K-12 systems, how do we, take that language back so that as we teach it to young Black and brown kids, but also non-Black and brown kids, how do we take that language back in a way that isn't creating division for K-12 students at such formative ages?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I don't know that it'd be a good, thoughtful response because we're kind of behind in the race, right? We're fourth quarter, we're down 2 touchdowns. I think and this is one of my biggest sort of, not to make this a political conversation, but one thing that really frustrates me about the left and about Democrats is that we're not very proactive, right? When it comes to messaging and narratives, right? I feel like the left is always kind of responding to the narrative and the conversation that's been established and grounded by the right, and that's what's kind of happening, right? And so now every conversation we're having about critical race theory, about ethnic studies, especially in the K-12 context, it's all going to be about defending it, right? Rather than actually saying what it's about, what's good about it, how it's beneficial, right? And so we all know, right? When you're defensive, you're never at your best when you're defensive, right? And so I don't want to just make up something, right? I really don't have a good response to your question. I think it's an important question. I think it's one we better figure out relatively soon. Because what's happening in Florida and Texas, right, and these other places, that could very easily become what's happening at the federal level. And if you think about a place like USD, right, private institution, if you accept federal financial aid, you're now under, you have to abide by federal laws and policies, right? And so that's what's kind of scary about this whole thing. And those of us who are sort of in this work and, champions of this work, I think we got comfortable and now we're trying to catch up.
Wow.
So that was really interesting. And actually, I think my question might help with that. Trey Watkins, in the third year in the education program, appreciate perspectives and expertise shared tonight, especially thinking about how they can be used in a practical term, right? I think that's very, very important. And part of the reason why, we're behind on this matter. And Dr. Harris, you talked about kind of the shifts that have happened over the last 15 years, right? And, in the world politically and all that. I was introduced to CRT in my master's program, right? That's what most of us find CRT, right? It's transformational for, my not just really as a scholar and understanding, theoretical concepts, but just to make sense of everyday life as a Black man walking through this world, right? But, in what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Texas, right? It does affect us. It's kind of scary. I thought there's a generation of junior scholars coming up that come up on CRT, who went up on CRT. I've read your work. I know Bell like the back of my hand. You know what I mean? Like, how would you encourage us going forward to fight that fight, to push forward, to show how it's useful, to show, what progress we can make to begin to take it back from a scholarly standpoint?
I think some of I shouldn't say the best research, but I think some of the research and scholarship that tends to be the most impactful is research and scholarship that has very strong practical everyday implications, right? And so if we can think about how do we not just do a study about, that has a CRT focus or applies a CRT lens, but make sure we're doing studies that solve real problems, right? Problems within institutions, problems within communities, like a lot of work that you talk about. I think that's where, we might, we have some promising progress. Finding opportunities to not just publish your work in academic journals, you have to do that, that's important, but also kind of make sure that your work has, you know, some presence and representation in more mainstream spaces. You know, that's why I think like, you know, podcasting and YouTube, and webinars, I mean, I think there's a lot more outlets and opportunities to really put scholarship in the public domain. Now, the reality is that maybe it's different now. You know, when I was a doctoral student, we didn't learn how to do those things, right? It was kind of like, you know, do what you have to do to get your work published in the best and the most selective academic journal that you can get in, right? But I feel like scholars after us, and those of you, you know, many of you who are here, you know, you grew up with social media, right? You have some competencies and expertise in how to engage communities much broader than your immediate one. And so I would say, don't lose sight of that. Use those same outlets, use those same, you know, tools and resources to share your work and to share your scholarship. That's what I was saying.
Thank you. I always feel like did you have one more statement?
Oh.
So I hate the fact that I try to keep time at these events, and it's always the hardest thing to do. We're going to move into breakout sessions, which for us here on the ground, we're going to go back out into the plaza and enjoy some more tacos. But we want you to think about those aha experiences that you've had by listening to our panelists. And how do you see CRT impacting your community? And how can we move forward towards healing within communities and ourselves, or wherever the conversation takes you? If you get in a group and have these conversations, we would love for somebody to be willing to share out. When we come back together, we'll only really have about 15 minutes to share together. Online, you'll have a little bit more time. And so we're just gonna go through some of our norms, which we think are really important before we head out. So Marques is going to read through those.
All right, just quick discussion norms that we ask everybody to abide by. Listen with intentionality and be okay with awkward silences. Don't be afraid to speak your truth. Share authentically and use I statements and really identify what you're about to share. We ask that you respect confidentiality and you know what is shared within the group. Certainly leave past this event, you know, if whoever spoke it does not wish to spoke. Really experience or lean into the discomfort. These are maybe new conversations for some of us in the room. We want to encourage you to lean in and be willing to have those. Be mindful of time, so we give everybody the opportunity to share their voice and their experience. Recognize that this is unfinished work and is always continuing as we, you know, progress through these events and hopefully encourage more people to be a part of our work. Recognize your communication style. Not everybody is going to be the most vocal leader or speaker in the room, so we ask that you respect others' communication style. And lastly, we ask that you examine your own assumptions and perceptions.
All right, I want to thank Richard and our wonderful panel. And so at this point, if we want to move out into the court.
All right, everyone. We hope you're enjoying the tacos and the lemonade. And so we're going to get started, do some share outs. If anyone would like to share what they've been discussing, some main points on our panel. Any questions? So we'll get started here. So we'll go with the front table right here to my right. Anybody want to share out or anything you want to share? Okay, yeah, that's true. Want to come to the mic? Come on to the mic, and if somebody wants to share out. Yeah. And you can get in the view of the camera, so come on. No? Not sure? Anything you learned? Anything? Come on. The first brave soul, yeah. Thank you. Anything you would like to share?
Hi. So I was talking in my breakout session with my friends, and we were talking about how it's often like when we're having these conversations or when I'm thinking about the people that I interact with, like I forget that I'm in a bubble and that there's a lot of other people that have like very different perspectives than me. And I say that still like loving the work that's being done and like loving these conversations, but I always have to keep reminding myself that there's a lot of people in this world and there's a lot of people in this country, and it's really easy to forget that there are lots of other people who have like feelings and they have different perspectives, and they're still people. You just have to respect them. But yeah, I don't know. It's something like, yeah.
All right. All right. Anyone else? Table in the back. Anybody want to share out? Okay. All right. I can hear you. You're good. All right. So, are we? You. All right. Thank you for the share out. We appreciate all of the participation and the feedback from, our amazing panelists and what they had to share for us this afternoon. At this time, we would like to offer the floor to some of our community partners who we've been in close collaboration with. And I want to give the first spot to Dreams and Ducket. I'm going to let them explain what they do and give them the floor. So, yeah. Cool.
Hey everybody, I'm gonna pick the mic up because I don't want to be. Thank you, Marques, for the introduction. Dr. Jez, thank you. My name's Rich. I am the founder of Dreams and Ducets. We're an education nonprofit consultancy based here in San Diego. We design solutions and programs to evolve learning alongside community and culture. So we work close with schools, with leading education agencies, with youth to create a space and learning experiences that elevate community, that champion community, that are rooted in culture in all its facets. And today's talk, with on CRT, critical race theory, this is something that for us, as I was experiencing it all, we don't take it on head on, but when it comes to how we go about our programming, whether it's through our work-based learning programming, whether it's through our personal development programming, our professional development and learning programming for teachers, critical race theory is there in the root. And as I'm thinking about it, it's really a matter of empowerment. Whether you're black or brown, Asian, white, or candy stripe, it's really a matter of how do we build ourselves up? How do we build others up to really be their full, empowered, and creative selves? Because the conversation about critical race theory, I think, gets wrapped up in a lot of who owns the conversation. Do the black folks own it? Do the brown folks own it? Do the white folks own it? Do the whoever owns it? It's really not a matter of ownership of the conversation. When we think about K through 12 education, which is the demographic that we're working in, well, 9 through 12, 16 to 24-year-olds, being on the ground, working with these young folks every day, there's more unity and love that they see in each other than any generation that I can really speak on, including my own, and definitely including the baby boomers and et cetera. And so I think what's important is when we think about critical race theory for the future in K through 12 schools, because that's where the conversation needs to be, we need to be real tactful and real careful about perpetuating the divisive language, about, oh, this is, a white supremacy thing, or, oh, this is a patriarchal thing. And those might be the facts, but it's real important, I think, to give sensitivity to what young people in the next generations that are coming have when they see people, of their own skin tone or not, right? Because I think the polarization of the world, their digital lives, how interconnected young people are these days and how they identify, there's a brilliant embrace. And so having this conversation about critical race theory, we got to be real careful as the shapers of the narrative that we don't tee it up for the next generation to feel like they own it, need to go do something with it, outside of another group of people, who they may otherwise have love and feel love for. If that makes sense. But yeah, I needed to say that because I was kind of tied to my question I had in there, my comment in there. But Dreams and Ducets, check us out. Again, we do a lot of work-based learning, professional development programming here in San Diego. So I can connect with you guys. It's dreamsducets.org. We're live here too, right? So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Rich. We appreciate that. And as we transition on, we'd like to introduce our next community partner. I would like to bring up the Palestine Solidarity Committee.
Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Marques and the rest of the BLM and Beyond Social Justice team for allowing me to speak briefly to you guys. My name is Eric, and I'm a current graduate student at the Kroc School of Peace Studies. I'll be getting my master's degree in Peace and Justice in May. And with being a student at the Peace and Justice program, I've been trained to analyze and understand systems of violence and oppression and how structural violence can perpetrate and foster itself within society. Therefore, in the spirit of social justice and advocacy, I want to highlight an advocacy campaign and petition that I've launched here on campus with my student organization, the Palestine Solidarity Committee at USD. Myself, along with my organization, is doing this advocating campaign and petition in regards to water justice issue and resisting injustices related to, but not limited to, water apartheid happening in Israel and Palestine. During my time at the Kroc School and trying to best understand how to bring equitable justice and social change to society, I've been reflective of how important it is to analyze the spaces I occupy and where I'm learning how to change society at whole, but also understanding how I can change that space while I'm there, because I believe that space could be a microcosm and an example to lead into a society which I want to be a part of and live in. To ensure this campaign effort is a measure of accountability to ensure that we are conducting ourselves in a way that is consistent with the shared values we express as individuals, but also as an institution and as a campus looking to lead change. I present this opportunity as putting theory into practice of those values and ethics and to uphold human rights. So I urge you all to take 5 to 10 minutes over this weekend, maybe later on today or after I finish speaking, to look into my organization's campaign. You could find it at tinyurl.com/USD-divest. And I want to thank you all for your time. Again, thank you to Marques for this opportunity, and I look forward to being agents of change with you all in solidarity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you again. And lastly, we would like to ask our last community partner here today to please come up and speak and share about what they do, the Jacobs Institute.
Thanks, Marcus. All right, hi again. I'm Payne Harris. I work at the Jacobs Institute, and I'm here with my wonderful team. And we have a lot of things that we do that I'd love to talk about. We have been helping out with the Biggie Black Ingenious Initiative, which has been really great. I'm really excited to see it start. The Black Ingenious Initiative is going to be helping Black students find a way educationally, and then the ultimate goal of it is to give them a path to higher education and to come to USD and fulfill their education, if I could just put it succinctly. Yeah. Another thing that I want to talk about that we do that's really cool at the Jacobs Institute is called A Space. It's a really cool program that I'm excited about that has a grant through the National Science Foundation. And A Space is a culturally affirming exploration in Minecraft. And so we're using Minecraft to explore Latinx spaces and to create a Latinx space for elementary school students in the Carlsbad school district. So I'm really excited about that. And we do so many cool things at the Jacobs Institute, and I really wish I could just sit here and talk about, like, Anchor STEM is another one that's really cool. And we also have Vismo is another cool thing. But yeah, I just wanted to share, like, Biggie and A Space. Yeah.
This is not playing, but I just saw the score. San Diego State University has advanced. So we want to congratulate San Diego State University. They're going to the Big Eight. Here's a representative of the university. We have him here personally. So congratulations to San Diego State.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lathan, for the ever so important update. All right, so as we start to wrap up this evening, we'd just like to once again thank you all for showing up and being really participative. And I don't want to steal the last spotlight that we have to offer to our wonderful dean, who was offered to do closing remarks for us. So please give a warm round to Dean Whitesmith.
I have to take out my notes because I'm at that age. remembering things. And there was so much wonderful, exciting conversation that I don't want to forget. I want to start with a quote from Brother James Baldwin from Notes of a Native Son. He says, "I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually." And really, isn't that what critical race theory was intended to do? To give us a framework to examine the inequalities that was happening with regards to sentencing of Black individuals in the criminal justice system, right? Was kind of the origins, is why it came from lawyers in the first place. And then we have kind of used it or kind of borrowed it in education through the use of intersectionality with Kimberly Crenshaw and later Gloria Latson-Billings and Bill Tate, who then really kind of used it and implemented it in education. But in response to the I think it was Rich who had the question about how do we bring it back into education. I'm just going to be blunt. We didn't have it in PK-12 education. We never discussed it as critical race theory in PK-12 education. It was just equity. It was just academic justice. It was kids getting lunch and breakfast before they go into their classrooms so that they can concentrate on their books. It was having resources so that they can have current books so that can study from. It's about having accurate historical facts being presented to them so that they know that they can see themselves in the history of the United States, right? It was about having high quality educators in the classroom, not somebody who just barely graduated and wants to do this because they think it's cool to work with Black and brown kids before they move on and go into business, right? And so kind of the root for me as a PK-12 educator in my former life is understanding the importance of why we have to continually critique the American education system. African American students are suspended and expelled at 3 times the rate of white students. No other ethnic group sees this kind of disproportionality in schools. In 2004, Congress acknowledged the racial disproportionality in subjective special education categories such as emotional disturbance, intellectual disability. African American students are significantly overrepresented in these categories. Their placements rates are 2.8 times higher than all other ethnic categories combined. So this is why looking at this is important, but also understanding the historical and systemic oppression that has happened to our students in our schools. It's also why the second part of this conversation really mattered to me, and that was about the healing aspect of the work that you all are doing and bringing to the table. You know, Dr. Harris talked a little bit about self-care and how it's important that as we are working in our communities and that we are pouring and giving of ourselves, that we also reach back and pour and give back into ourselves. You know, Khea talked about co-creating spaces so that we can have courageous dialogue and conversations where our passion for our experiences aren't seen as anger, right? But really can be seen for the passion and righteous anger that we have for this work. Dr. Lathan talked about spirituality and the fact that it's really important as we continue to do this work and as we work with our communities that we're able to bring our whole selves right to the work, which includes our spirituality as a people, as a group, right? Not just religiosity, but also that spirit that drives us, that gets us to wake up in the morning and it keeps us going. So whatever that looks like for us, for some, it might be a matter of religiosity. For others, it might be, I do meditation, right? But it's important to tie these things together because we know that people who are drawn to service professions, we are drawn to these professions because at some point in our lives, I'm sure that we have experienced some form of trauma for ourselves, right? Whether that's childhood trauma, whether that's trauma, you know, through higher ed, whether that's trauma in our workplace. And we are working to ensure that later generations of people and other people in our communities don't have to endure the same oppressive acts that we have endured, right? And so people who are bringing trauma to the table are working with other people who have trauma. It's so critical that we attend to this and we attend to ourselves so that we can continue to work in spaces and work in right accord with ourselves and with our community. And before I leave, I just want to leave you with some words from Brother Sean Ginwright, who is a professor at San Francisco State. And he has a book that I hope that you check out called Hope and Healing in Urban Education. And he writes, I suspect that hope and the capacity to dream of a world beyond the present has always been the heart of social justice movements. Hope in and of itself is an important form of resistance, both political and personal, and reaffirms when it is possible and worth fighting for. However, unlike the mass civil rights movement of the 1960s that ushered in groundbreaking legislation, today requires a new movement that is both inwardly and focused on healing from the wounds inflicted from, this is where I should have put my other glasses on, structural oppression and outwardly focused on social change. The dual focus represents a new way of movement building by engaging a collective conversation about the power of hope and the meaning it holds for each of us. And so as we leave this conversation, we have to work in solidarity towards action. I think Brother Harris said that first, you know, this conversation, what will be healing most about this conversation is that we leave with tangible actions towards, you know, our collective movement. But we also have to collectively turn inwardly and look at our own selves with regards to healing and really engendering that hope and inspiring others in the process. So thank you so much for your attention and for all of the work that you've put into our brainstorming and thinking. And at this point, well, I turn it back over to Dr. Jez, and good night.
So I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists, to Richard and Marques who helped put this together. And also our community partners who showed up today, and each one of you who took part of your Friday to be here with us. And then, of course, a plug for our next event, which will be our Juneteenth event. Our very first event back in 2020 was a Juneteenth event, and it kicked off this series, and the series has continued to go on. Now for our Juneteenth events, we always look back at what we've been doing for the last year, and then we look forward to what we want to see done in the future. So you'll see these flyers on the tables. If you can use the QR code and sign up for that, then you can continue to be part of our community as we continue to grow and build and dialogue, change, and create hope for our futures. Thank you.